Let us entertain this thought. Extraterrestrial contact is happening. Uncomfortably, we can acknowledge that for many years, perhaps eons, these mystery beings come into the dark of night to abscond us from our surroundings and use us for their own whims. First-hand encounters retell stories of individuals, even groups, being taken to strange craft and their bodies being used for experimental purposes. Are they using us to hybridize? Luring us into the hopes to exterminate us? You see, we don't know for certain. These accounts do not depict these visitors as benevolent. Rather, they show a dark, disturbing crusade, a cause that can be summed up in one phrase: we can take you at any place at any time for whatever we want. In this episode, we sit down with Butch Witkowski. Butch has been investigating and collecting reports of these horrifying encounters for over 35 years and has inherited the work of an esteemed researcher, the late Elaine Douglas, and her work in the Journal of Abnormal Abduction Research. To those that have survived these experiences, well, they've never been the same. Skeptics may scoff, many may disbelieve, but does it change the fact that it has happened? I mean, something awful had to happen to these people, enough for them to break silence, face ridicule, and share these extraterrestrial horror stories.
The idea of a creature larger than a gorilla with an odor like a skunk might seem far-fetched.
From the beginning of his time on Earth, man has always been fascinated by monsters, real or imagined.
The outside world is very judgmental about these things, with many people not believing in them whatsoever.
Cloaked in secrecy, they show up without warning, state their business, then vanish as quickly as they appear.
They only land in isolated places. They have taken people, I believe. They do have technology.
But the idea is if enough people focus on something, like thousands and thousands of people focus their mind on something and the image, in a very strange way, they can kind of create a real-world version of the fictional entity.
Fact, fantasy, and history have come together to tease the imagination.
That the truth will out, and that no one lie can live forever.
Welcome to SuperNormal.
So, studying ufology all those years, I just had this hankering to look into abduction. And, first, you got to start with the definition of alien abduction, which is basically subjectively real memories of being taken secretly or against one's will by apparently non-human entities and subjected to complex and psychological procedures, which was no big deal, because there was a lot of that. But the thing struck me then as I started reading different books and, talking to different folks that really were involved in abduction. I'm thinking to myself, so how many people could really be missing? That's where we rang the bell. Mm-hmm. So I went into the NCIC statistics, which is the National Crime Information Center. And I got the figures for 2008 and 2010, and the FBI runs a year's separation between reports filed and reports put out to the public. So in 2008, they had 778,000 missing person reports filed. Now, approximately 95% of those are found. 75% are runaways under the age of 18. Another 20% are spousal abuse, murders, elderly, ransom demands, etc. But the number that stuck out the most was that 5% are never found. I mean, no trace whatsoever, no bodies, no leads, no nothing. And that number came out to 38,000.
Wow.
So in 1991, the missing reports, going back to 1991, which was when they actually started putting out this report on missing persons, there was a total of 13,861,000 people gone. So using the same math, 5% or 693,000 are never found. No trace ever located, ever found. So in that 17-year period from 91 to 2008, there were 40,759 people missing a year, every year. So I kept updating it until 2018. And that 5% stays the same. It never changes. Now, that's only the United States. That's not Canada. That's not anything overseas. So if you would just think about that for just a second, and you have all, the 40-some thousand a year in the United States, how many people are missing in the continent of Africa?
Yeah.
How many are missing it? How many are missing in Europe? It just gets bizarre. So
it's staggering.
Yeah. So then, after that, then I figured out, well, I want to see what the scientists have to say. You always got to quote the scientists. So I talked to a couple mental health people, and they're pretty much all the same. They said, look, you got deception. People are prone to fantasy, false memory syndrome, personality disorders, sleep phenomenon, environmental factors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm thinking, that's nuts. First of all, the abduction scenario has nothing to do with any of those. I mean, you have a capture, you have a loss of time, examination, a conference with your captors, a tour of the ship usually, the return, and the aftermath, and theophany, which is the one with the universe, very religious. And everybody has that. And again, when you follow up on the stories, forgetting the mental experts, the same thing with the areas of interest with the aliens. You have the cranium, the nervous system functions, skin samples, reproductive systems, both male and female, cardiovascular system, respiratory system, lymphatic system, and the lower section of the abdomen. So that, I just wasn't buying the mental aspect of it, from the soothsayers, I guess call them. And there's a lot of notable cases that have not been disproven.
Okay. What are some of those cases, Butch? Let's talk about those a little bit. And before we go off on that, we are talking with Butch Witkowski, a former co-host of mine. We've done a bunch of shows together, and we wanted to talk about something a little different tonight that we normally talk about with our audience. And, guys, this is a subject that's disturbing, right? And we have to look at it as a reality because, Butch, as you said, there's physical attributes to these events that just can't be refuted.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the cases, the most notable cases, I guess, kind of range from 1956, 57 up to 73, 74, 75. And you have the Boas case in Brazil. You have the Hills case, of course, in 1961. The Shermer case in 67. The Pascagoula case down in Florida. Travis Walton in 75. The Allagash incident in 76. Whitney Strieber in the 70s and 80s. And those cases were all researched by some of the best out there. And they're cases that cannot be disputed or refuted. I mean, they've been gone through and gone over, and so many times there's been books written on them. And it was amazing. I saw you guys did the John Keel thing. And I remember listening to one of his interviews where he was asked about abductions. And I didn't even, I expected there to be no kind of answer to that question. And he says, it's real. I mean, that was his answer. It's real. But, abduction takes you into the dark side of ufology. And you can get yourself in a lot of trouble when you get into that kind of stuff, with other researchers especially. It's not to be talked about. At first, cattle mutilations weren't talked about a lot, but they started in the 50s, and those stories kept going up until today, and they are what they are. And, so following the natural progression of investigation, I went from abduction to if they're hurting humans, why are they doing it to animals? So I went to cattle mutilation. And, most of it's in the Four Corners, has taken place in the Four Corners of the United States. And, you have the authorities, just like the mental experts. They blame the pharmaceutical companies who alleged that they were using the excised organs for research, or there were cults using organs in the rituals. But again, almost like human abduction, you had no physical traces, no footprints, no crush marks, no tire prints, no imprints in the snow, no indications of man or predators near the carcass. So, but the wounds were real. They were precision cuts. They were cauterized by extreme heat. And, the same things were missing from pretty much every carcass. I mean, out of all the cases I looked at, the eyes, tongue, lips, jaw, sexual organs, lower intestines, udders. And then, of course, following that natural progression, I had this wild thought in my head, like, well, if they're mutilating cattle, would they be mutilating humans? Well, yeah, that really got me in a lot of trouble. But anyway, the rumors started in the 60s, and that came to the forefront. The human corpses were being found with the exact same kind of wounds they were finding in cattle. And it was automatically dismissed by the ufologists in the whole realm of ufology as being in bad taste and not factual. Well, there were a lot of cases that I found. Sergeant J.P. Lovett, U.S. Air Force, 1956. White Sands, New Mexico testing grounds. They took a test shot of a small missile. And he and his colonel went out to rummage and get some other parts that they had, some recording devices that were on that missile. Mm-hmm. And the colonel was on one side of a little sand mound. He couldn't see the sergeant, but he heard the sergeant yelling just enough to get to the top of a sand dune to see the sergeant being pulled into a craft.
Oh, wow.
Screaming his head off. So he quickly got back to the base, reported it to the commander. They placed him under arrest for the murder of Sergeant Levitt. Huh. Of course.
No questions asked. Just, hey, you killed
No question. No, that's it. So they go out the next day with a search party in the same realm, and they found Sergeant Levitt. And he pretty much looked like any cattle mutilation that had been recorded to date. The most prolific and the one with the most information with the autopsy reports, photographs of the crime scene and everything else was in the Guadarapiranga Dam in Brazil in 1988. And two fishermen were out on the dam and just fishing, normal day, nothing different than any other day. It supplies, that dam is very huge, large dam. It supplies all the water for Sao Paulo, Brazil. And they thought what they saw looked like a body on the edge of the dam on the beach area. So they rode over and they took a look and they quickly scrambled and got the police, of course, which doesn't happen all the time. The police showed up with forensic forensic people. They showed up with doctors. They showed up with rescue team, the whole 9 yards. And the autopsy report claimed that the man, his death was due to massive trauma, but he had no signs of rigor mortis or livor mortis. And his time of death was placed at 40 to 72 hours. This guy should have been as stiff as a statue. There was no bloating to the body or noticeable amount of blood at the scene. And in the report, which I had to have translated because it was in Portuguese, that's very expensive. Don't ever do it. It said
we talked about that. That was an ordeal. That was quite a process.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. That was like going to the dentist. But anyway, the crime scene itself the decedent is found with his jaw was surgically removed, eyes, left ear, inner ear, lower jaw, inner throat, and tongue. There were 1 inch to 1.5 inch holes in muscle areas, tissue areas. Glands are removed: shoulder, chest, navel, thigh. Testicles were removed. Prostrate gland was removed via the urethral tube. That had to hurt.
Yeah. That's a stroke.
Oh, yeah. The intestines were removed via a hole in the navel. Anus was cored out to the colon, just like cattle. But the body presented no signs of bloating, which in itself is remarkable due to the high heat range in that area. And there was no body odor whatsoever. None, which is just crazy. So getting back to vital reaction. Vital reaction is a term used in police work and forensics, and it indicates the response of living tissue to injury. So by definition, it can only be occurred during life, and therefore it's an index of antemortem injury. It's considerable importance to any investigation with a body or anything like that in forensic medicine, trying to establish, that an injury was inflicted before death or after death. And what it boils down to, if you would take a knife and stab somebody and pull the knife out, okay, you would have a clean cut. I mean, they'd be gone dead. You stabbed them, little blood here and there, but clean cut, they're done. But if the person's still alive when that's being done and he's fighting you off, then you have the area is black and blue, contorted, contused, ripped. The skin is ripped and all that stuff. And what the autopsy came back with their final estimation after they describe all the injuries done to the guy, it was he was alive when these procedures were inflicted upon him. And there was an animal case. There was a pony that was mutilated, a family pet. And the detectives were out. They found the body of the horse, and they were out checking it out and photographing and all that stuff. And the one detective looked, the other detective says, what's wrong with this picture? The eyes are missing. And he's like, he says, if the horse is laying on his side and the eye was removed, the viscous fluid from the eye would flow down the side of its head, correct?
Okay.
This one, the viscous fluid flowed down from the removed eye down the snout off the nose. So the horse was standing when that happened.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I have a two-part question just to interject, as long as we're at this point. Mm-hmm. Let's say hypothetically that this is an extraterrestrial or an alien being, whatever, that's doing this. Mm-hmm. First part of the question is, in your personal opinion, do you think that this activity is happening on the surface here, or are they being abducted and having this done and then replaced here? And then the second part of the question is, why would you bring it back? Why wouldn't you dispose of it in space or wherever you're going with it? I know that's a pretty big question and it's loaded. I understand that. But this is a question I've always had. Why are these creatures or people left here after this is done? Is it done here and then they leave and just leave the carcass behind? Or are they actually taking it on board, whatever craft, doing what they want to do? Why wouldn't they just put it in a garbage disposal and get rid of it?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are a number of cases. I was in contact with two researchers in England, basically they're archaeologists, and they had heard me on the radio or something about these human mutilations. And they were would go to these old abbeys and cathedrals and look up through church records, and the English kept church records that go back to probably day one, to find out different things about the history of a certain area, a certain village, a certain location. And they came upon a couple, not one, but a couple. And I asked them what a couple was, and the guy said, about 2 or 3, I think. And the one was a gentleman very well known in the little town. This was back in the late 16th century. Very well known, very well to do. And he was last seen like on a Monday, and nobody saw him again. They put out a search, tried to find him, this, that, and the other thing. On a Saturday morning, a young fellow went to go get a load of coal at the coal pile. Up on top of the coal pile lies this gentleman, no clothing, pretty much done in the same as the guy in Brazil. They found 2 more like that, and they couldn't photograph anything out of the book because, they forbid that, and they'll do damage to the paper and stuff. So they sent me that stuff, and I tried to look it up. I couldn't find anything, and then they just pretty much disappeared off the map. Their emails didn't work anymore. Phone numbers were disconnected, so I figured, okay, we'll let that go. But then you have another case that was close. That happened in Egypt. And this is going to answer your part 2 question, I think. Mm-hmm. But in Cairo, Egypt, in 2005, there was a family that was found butchered, same way as our boy in Brazil. And the whole family, husband, wife, children, cats, dogs, chickens, whatever was in that house was taken apart. Parts were missing, the whole 9 yards. The Egyptian police pinned it on a retarded gentleman that lived the other end of town. I mean, there was a trial, the whole 9 yards. He was pretty much on his way to the hangman's noose. Mm-hmm. And his lawyer, presented his case, and they pretty much figured out that this guy didn't even know what a knife was for, let alone did he have the capacity to do that type of surgery. So he was acquitted on the premise that he could not leave the town. That's number one. He could only go to the mosque. He had to be in the company of 2 male members of his family and a police officer at all times. I did get to talk to his lawyer, and she said, she said he's lucky he can tie his shoes. So all these bodies that were found, whether it was Lovett or Brazil or Bliss, Idaho, where they found a guy in a canyon that was missing for a month, done in the same way, Cairo, a lot of these cases are just coming to light over these years, but the fact of the matter is they're all left laying out in the open. Now, the last one that I would mention that kind of, I think, answers the question is a family of 3, or this is over in England, Cheshire, England, out for the night, going home, on traveling the road that takes them to their home. And the husband catches something out of the corner of his eye, which he says looked like somebody laying on the field on a slight hill. So he gets up there and, loses his marbles, because there is a husband, a wife, a daughter, and a son laying there, the same butchery, but they were skinned. That has never come up in any of these other cases. These people were skinned, professionally skinned. So before he could get to town and make the report to the local constabulary, the United States military was on scene collecting up the body parts. How did they know that?
I was just going to say, who tipped them off that that's where they were? Wow.
Yeah, how do they know that? There's another case which we just cannot get any information on. I mean, it seems like a lot of people know about it, but we just can't find anything. There was a special ops firefight in Vietnam, 1967, 67 or 68, and what happened was a plane went down, and they sent out a special ops team to, search recovery, bodies, whatever they could get. And when they get there, this plane, which they found, was pretty much overrun with people that didn't look like us. And kind of a small firefight ensued. Yay for our team. We won. But they got inside the craft, inside the plane. The pilot and the crew were all found, just like the guy in Brazil.
What?
So you got all these cases where, like you said, why would they not just dispose of them in space? Why wouldn't? I mean, these guys were still sitting in their seats in the plane. So I would probably put two and two together and say the stuff is done here, and they don't really care if they're seen or the bodies are found or not. I mean, the people laying up on the hill, they're out in the open. The guy in Brazil, I mean, he was totally out in the open. So, why? Is it a warning? So then, after you go through all that, then you want to try to decipher why, or what's the reason for the cattle mutilations? What are they looking for? What's the reason for the human mutilations? We have reports that's in Zimbabwe, where you have the men of the tribe leave very early in the morning to go about their business, hunting, work, whatever they do. And they leave behind, mom, the kids, all that stuff. And they come home later that afternoon, and pots are cooking, meals are out, wash is hanging on the line, and there ain't nobody there.
The whole village.
The whole village.
I remember this story, and it was
never been.
Trace.
No trace, no footprints, no drag out bloody battle or anything like that. It's just like they were there when these guys left, and when they got back, they were gone. During
that's terrifying.
Yeah, well, and it's happened a lot, because during World War, right before World War I, the Arabs and the English and the Turks, they were all at each other's throats. And the English, the British, were pretty much on the Arab side, and they had sent up an observation plane, a two-man plane, kind of like a Piper Cub, to keep track of the Turkish movements, the Turkish army movements. And when they failed to return, they sent a search party out, and a whole week went by, and they finally found the plane. So here sits the plane. It's got plenty of fuel. It was a good landing. It wasn't crashed. The pilot and the co-pilot, a colonel and a captain, were both missing. The door was open. They followed the footprints of the two gentlemen from the plane out about 125, 30 yards, and they just disappeared.
What?
They get a pilot on scene, starts the plane up, and flies it back to the base. There's nothing wrong with the plane whatsoever. They never radioed in anything. There was no fight, no ammunition spent, nothing. It was just gone.
Kind of like that scene in Close Encounters where they find the plane.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
At the beginning, yeah. And this stuff happens. And Butch, we together, I've been just an ancillary character in this, but, we've done an investigation into a Pennsylvania case that's been, quite controversial, right? A lot of people don't even like us talking about it. Like you said, all these cases, human mutilation, human abduction, it seems like it's kind of frowned upon. Is it because of the graphic nature of it, or do you think it's just something people really don't want to deal with?
I think in the ufology world, it's almost like delving into the black arts.
Gotcha.
It makes them look bad. They don't want people to even think about this stuff that could happen. You never hear ufologists, with the exception of a couple, I happen to be one of those a-holes, that that if something happens or there's something strange or you encounter a being that is not of our own, that you get the hell out of there. Run. There are a lot of ufologists that think, well, wait a minute, we should shake hands, talk, get to know each other, maybe go down to Circle K, get a fruit drink or something, maybe a cup of coffee, sit down and shoot the crap for a little while. That's nonsense.
Right.
They are not benevolent. They are malevolent. I mean, if they were benevolent, this stuff wouldn't happen, first of all, cattle or humans. There wouldn't be cancer. There wouldn't be a common cold. There wouldn't be a coronavirus. There wouldn't be anything like that on this planet. There's a researcher I've been working with in Puerto Rico who has a theory on the abductions and the cases that we discussed, where he said they need something. There's something that the body and the of an animal, certain animals, and we possess like that they need. Or something. Well, yeah, and he's thinking it's more in line with the feral, fluids in the brain and fluids that flow through the body, and he's a real doctor. I mean, he's a scientist, and he's been at it now for I think 8 years. Really nice guy, and every time he finds something new, I get this thing in Spanish, and I got to send him an email back and go like, English, please.
Right.
But. I mean, I think he's onto something. There's got to be some kind of correlation between the animals and the human mutilations. Now, right. The case that Sean was talking about is the Todd Z's case, which took place in August of 2002 up in Montour, on the Montour Ridge in Montour County, and that is a case that I've been working on so long.
Because I've known you for a long time.
Well, I started that case in 2008, and actually I started it pretty much by mistake, because at that point it was when I was starting looking at abductions, and I heard about this case and looked into it a little bit, and I came up with like, wow, this is weird, and then just off and on went in and out, but. On August 4th, 2002, a white male, 39 years old, Todd Cease, disappeared. Now, he advised his wife on 8/4/02 that he was going to spot some preseason deer on Montour Ridge, which he did every season. Stated he would be home by noon, 2 o'clock. Wife reports husband missing. Family starts a search. Eventually, they can't find anything. They call in. The search mounted by local state police, local police, fire companies, rescue teams. His ATV that he was on undamaged, along with the key, no keys, but the vehicle was there, no accident or anything like that, and he was nowhere in sight. A search with cadaver dogs, they found nothing. Guys on horseback, they found nothing. Helicopter, nothing. There were over 250 searchers. They searched a pond on his property. They stopped the search that particular day, started up again the next day. They resumed the search, and they found the body of Todd Cease approximately 50 yards from his back door, under a tree. Now, he, I was fortunate enough to get the autopsy report and a lot of stuff. I mean, I've got binders of documentation, and I didn't take anybody's word for anything. I wanted it on paper, or I wanted it by email, or whatever. So the cause that they said cause of death was cocaine overdose. Well, I couldn't find anybody that said this guy ever smoked a joint. The only police report we found on him was a speeding ticket. He was doing 35 in a 25 zone, which he paid. That's it. We could find no driver's license, although he was a truck driver. We could find no military record, no hospital records, no birth records, no marriage records. no military record. I mean, this guy was just pretty much erased. There was just nothing to find. And he was found wearing. He actually went out outfitted in a camouflage coverall, and he was found in shorts and a t-shirt, no boots, and just socks. And but it was from where the ATV was found to where his body was found. It's a little over a mile. And we've been up there a number of times, and I mean, with hiking boots on, you can barely walk up those trails because it's just rocks, nothing but sharp rocks. This guy evidently, supposedly, with the amount of cocaine he had ingested, supposedly, and I shared that with a few pathologists who said this guy wouldn't have been able to take 10 steps without dying. That's how massive dose it was. So I got a guy that should be dead walking pretty much barefooted from his ATV and falling underneath a tree on his property 25 yards from his back door, and the bottom of his socks aren't even dirty.
Yeah. Boy, if this doesn't scream so many cases of missing 411.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It fits the profile in a way, but it gets a little weird.
Yeah. Well, then I'm contacted by the family, and the family says, that they were out looking for his keys for the ATV because they were missing, and they found his coveralls. And in the pocket, no keys, So they thought, well, we ought to turn this stuff in. So they took the coveralls in. They went through all the pockets. They took it to the police department, turned it in. At the autopsy, the local police says, yeah, we found a packet of cocaine in the pocket. I don't know about you guys, but if that was my brother, they wouldn't have seen any cocaine ever. Yeah. You know what I mean? And they were furious. Till this date, and we have a lot of correspondence with family and friends, and nobody had a bad thing to say about these guys. He ran the Little League for years, and they said, hell, if we knew he was even smoking a joint, he wouldn't get anywhere near these kids. So they were just here's this guy who has no background. I talked to the sergeant who ran the drug teams up in that area, and he never heard of him. He said, I know every scumbag in 2 counties that sold drugs, bought drugs, used drugs. He said, this guy's name never came up. I went, okay. At the same time, or during the same period of time, a year one way or the other, there have been reported UFO sightings. And one sighting by law enforcement that were going to answer a call on a domestic. And they were on the other side of the ridge, going to this call where they saw a unknown vehicle in the air, and it was right around the same time that the Todd Cease issue came up. Oh. And the whole case was it was so wrong. I mean, the autopsy, the connection in the autopsy, like the doctor that did the actual autopsy at the Allentown Hospital, and the guy that worked for her, who was an assistant, was pretty much military, not so nice ops. It seemed like right after this took place and it started coming out in the open a little more, which I hope I was one of those that helped bring it out, all these people retired. All of them, including the law enforcement people. Oh yeah, it's bizarre.
Yeah,
and
keep in mind that there was also an independent investigator working with us on this too.
Oh yeah,
that, can validate a lot of things that are being said. So it's not like it's just Butch getting facts. Like, this is a cumulative effort from a bunch of different people, and it's interesting, isn't it, Butch? Like it's just. There's something to it, man.
Oh yeah, I didn't want to, in the very beginning up and through almost to the end, I tried to stay out of it. Only I did everything from the house here, where the investigator that I was using was out of Florida, and he was a bona fide detective, and he worked for the Florida Highway Patrol.
Good guy.
And he did all the legwork and all the contacts. He set up Facebook pages and stuff. It was amazing. He set up a Todd Cease Facebook page, and it was getting hits.
Mm.
There were people he went to school who didn't even know he was dead.
Wow.
I mean,
wow.
It's I'm at the point in my career, ufology and now cryptozoology. I'm blaming that on Lon and Sean and
I did put
yes, you did. And but I've come to the idea now where this is a time when we need to focus on why we're really doing this, and it isn't about organizations, bureaucracy, or politics. It's a hunt for the truth, and that's it.
Right. And all you can do is start with a speculation and go from there.
Well, Vance, the thing about this is there are so many things that we were told didn't exist or that we've never seen that my hands were on it. I've seen it. I've seen it standing next to Butch. Like documents that people said, oh, those documents don't exist. Well, I don't know about you, Butch, but you and I sat and looked through a file of documents. Yeah. They were pretty real to me.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's why in the very beginning I made up my mind. Whatever I got in information, I wanted to be a good document. I wanted voicemail, whether it was voicemail or an email or a letter with a letterhead, signed, dated, all that stuff. And I got all that. And that, even the autopsy report. I got the autopsy report, got the toxicology report, everybody's signatures on there, everything's kosher. So, and I know there were people out there trying to debunk it, but the thing that always stuck me with stuff like that, besides a couple of those people I'd like to, well, we won't get into that, is the fact that why are you so intent on disproving something that you can't disprove? What's in it for you?
Right.
Who's telling you to do this, or who's saying that it didn't happen that way? And we've never been challenged with the evidence. Never. Never had anybody challenge us. Because they know if they do, I'm going to show them the paperwork.
Right.
You don't have an autopsy report? Oh, yeah, I do. Here it is. Oh, you don't have a letter from the coroner? Oh, yeah, I do. Here it is.
Right.
And then there were a couple. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, do you think a lot of this may just be let's not talk about it and maybe it'll go away?
I think.
Oh, yeah. When we were up there, we went to the firehouse to talk to the fire department, right? And they're not there all day, So we were trying to get a copy of their report for the day, their fire report, for who they dispatched and everything. We already knew who was dispatched and all that stuff, but I wanted it in paper. And we called the emergency number that was left on the door next to a phone and told them who we were, and they hung up on us. Called back. Asked if there was somebody there we can talk to, like chief, assistant chief, maybe lieutenant, somebody like that. Hung up. Called back again. The line was disconnected.
Wow.
Now, in all of this, when it started, I've only ever had one thing happen to me. About maybe 2 years into the case, I had a phone call. And it was just a voice that said, you need to just back away from this. And they hung up. And I had the number off the phone, called it right back. No such number existed.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
3 weeks after. 3 weeks after that, almost to the day, I get a call from an investigator that works for Bob Bigelow at Skinwalker Ranch. Want to know some information on a UFO sighting that took place up in northeastern Pennsylvania about a month prior. I gave him the information. I said it was a hoax, but it just seems a little odd that I get that call, and then I get another call that says, "This is an investigator for Bob Bigelow Aerospace." I thought,
Butch, in all these investigations, and you got the work of the late Eileen Douglas with J.A.A.R.
Oh yeah,
and all the research that you've put into this. have you ever come across a survivor of abduction that could tell you the specific purpose upon which they were collected for?
I had one that was I'm going to say close because it's. I think I'm a step in the right direction, or maybe not. Best way I can explain that. The person that was abducted, and this actually happened when they were 25 years old, 24 years old. Just graduated out of college, got some kind of degree in science, had to do with gene research and that kind of stuff, and had 2 abduction scenarios that were, in his mind, absolutely real, flat out real, no question about it. And he said that although everything kind of went like the normal procedures of a quote-unquote normal abduction, a lot of emphasis was on what he learned, what he was studying. And I'm thinking, now that's odd. That's really odd, because nobody's ever questioned. They're just, they may be told to keep quiet, shut up, lay down, bend over, whatever, but never questioned. And he said he was questioned, he said, in his mind, extensively about the gene splitting and DNA research that he was doing in school and this, that, and the other thing. Now, I can't mention his name because he has gone on to become pretty much quasi-famous for his work in gene research and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But it's the only case I know of or have ever heard of where somebody's questioned about what they do for a living or what they studied or what they were doing. I mean, that's just bizarre to me. And he's never had anything since. So, why? I have no idea. I even asked, when I started dealing with the doctor down in Puerto Rico, I asked him if he had ever been abducted or anything like that. He says, not that I'm aware of. And I told him that. Exactly. I told him that story. Now, there have been researchers that have gotten to fresh kills. When I say a fresh kill, it's been maybe a mutilation has taken place within 24 to 48 hours. The carcass is still there. And they have taken EMF readings and get very high EMF readings around the brain area. Now, brains aren't touched here in this country, but over in England, sheep are mutilated a lot. And if you're familiar with the movie Predator, when he aims his weapon off his shoulder, it's like a triangle of 3 dots.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay. Well, on the sheep, behind their ear, on their would be right side, behind the ear are 3 dots and a triangular hole, and the brain stem are missing.
Good.
But that's the only place it's ever happened, and continues to happen. Mm-hmm. And they also have a run on. Now, this could be anybody, though. I just kind of passed it off as some loony or some drunk that don't like cats. They've been finding cats that have been cut in half, lots of them, and they're not taken or anything like that. They're wherever it happened, wherever that was done, it was there. The only problem with that is no blood. And the wound is as clean as clean can be.
Well, a lot of the mutilations that we've talked about over the years, and even with the Todd C's case, the missing blood, right? That's a telltale sign of something that's not quite right. And Todd C's isn't the only human mutilation case there is, Butch. That's the most popular because we've been involved. But when you go. And you folks, you can look this stuff up online, but just be careful. Some of the pictures aren't for the faint of heart.
Right.
It is happening, right? So we were doing Vance, Butch, and I were filming for On the Trail of UFOs. Butch is on the final episode, and you could tell when you were sitting down, Butch, talking to Seth and Shannon and them, that you were giving them information that they weren't hearing from anybody else.
Oh, yeah.
I think.
Well, nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah, nobody wants to talk about it. And I think that's, this is just one part, this little episode we're doing here tonight, because we're running the clock down. This is one part of more that I think we have to talk about, because these are really horrifying experiences. And Butch, people that have survived these experiences, they don't quite come back the same.
No, they don't. No. There's two ways they come back. They tell their story one time, they're done. Mm-hmm. They'll never talk about it again.
Right.
Or they tell their story one time and they can't stop talking about it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing we can do for them other than, we can say, oh, look, you can go to some doctor or maybe some psychiatrist, try to help you out.
My friend's over at Starborn, right? Melton, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, he works with folks that, have those kind of experiences. There are help for people out there like that, but you just don't have a lot of medical professionals or, psychological professionals lining up to say, hey, talk to me about your alien abduction.
When you talk about putting people under hypnosis, that can be very dangerous.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I mean, you could take somebody absolutely normal, and when you're done, you got a raving maniac. So.
Well, yeah, and especially if there's some sort of hypnotic device that's been used during an abduction, and where they're completely aware, but they're calm enough through manipulation to survive it. But then to go through hypnosis and relive it, you may not have that stabilization, and who knows, you may have a massive heart attack out of fear of reliving that moment. Yeah. So, it is dangerous.
Fear induction is a real thing, and that's something that, Vance, that's a good point to think about. I'm not a big fan of it myself. I don't know if it's quite safe, not just from a physical sense, but from a psychological sense. You don't know what kind of damage you're putting somebody through by making them relive that.
No.
And there's no control. There's no control over it as much as we think there is. There's no control. Messing with the human mind is a dangerous thing.
Right.
Well,
I wanted to go ahead, Butch.
No, I was just going to say, just like the question of abduction, like everybody always goes like, well, what is it? So what are we dealing with? Extraterrestrial beings, interdimensional beings, time travelers, all of the above? People are being affected in a very real way, and it's happening to many, many people, unlike the UFO people would like to say. So I always tell people, just be more open-minded that, both you and I do not have all the answers to this strange and amazing universe, that's for sure.
Not at all. I wanted to bring up a point that you made earlier in what you were talking about. It seems to me because over probably the last 5 years, maybe even 10 years, the older you get, the faster time goes. But as you look into the mutilations, whether it be human or animal, it always seemed to me, and I wanted your opinion if you felt the same way, it seems to me that the surgical precision and what is being done seems to me that it's done in a nanosecond. All of it, because if and like you said, there's evidence that the being, whatever it is, animal or human, was alive when it happened. Mm-hmm. But it would seem that with that much going on, you would kill somebody just through shock if you're doing that much to them. But if they were alive, it seems to me that it would have had to have happened, all of that, in a very, very small time frame. Maybe 1 or 2 seconds, and then they're done and on their way, and leave this carcass behind.
Yeah. And well, there's only two things it could be. It's either, like you just said, it happened in a nanosecond, or they were drugged, some type of drug, or incapacitated in some way, mentally, against pain or anything like that, or memory. And that's it. But the autopsy reports that have been read where these people are, look, it's the nanosecond thing you just mentioned is not so far-fetched, because there's a case, cattle mutilation, that was in Colorado, I believe, I could be wrong. It might have been Montana, but I'm pretty sure it was Colorado, where a gentleman had a prized heifer. He just brought her out of the barn, put her in kind of a little walking area, going in to clean up the barn. He came out and she was laying there mutilated.
Well, the same thing happened at Skinwalker with the calf that they had just tagged, and they walked, whatever, was it 400 feet away to go tag another one, and the dog's barking, and this thing is mutilated.
Yeah.
In a very short amount of time. So.
And you have people that say, well, the mutilation, it could have been a coyote, it could have been a wolf. I want to tell you something. You look up a wolf kill. Yeah. A wolf will tear it apart.
Oh, exactly.
I mean, and they go for the soft tissue belly, that area first. And they don't just chew off an ear or suck out an eye or rip out a tongue or jaw. And I personally got involved in a case in North Dakota where a young lady was riding on an indoor equestrian ring with her horse. There was nobody else there. It's a clean ring, so there's nothing sticking out of the walls, anything like that, and it's all cushioned and nice dirt and all that stuff. And my wife was an equestrian rider, so I've been around one or two of those. And she stopped the horse, just dropped the reins, went back to get a curry comb out of her box down a little hallway, and came back, and the horse is standing there, and she sent me the pictures. And his jaw, the side of his head is ripped open from right below the eye, clean down through, and the jaw is totally exposed, and a piece of the jaw is missing.
That's horrifying.
Now, I have the pictures, and the vet came, and the vet, there's no way we can save this horse, and they had to put the horse down, but they timed it and walked it off from where the horse, and the horse was standing exactly where she left it.
Right.
And the horse made no sound whatsoever. Now, being that my wife has spent a fortune on horses over the years, you flick a horse's ear with your finger, and you're going to get a reaction, let alone stand there and surgically remove his lower jaw. What the hell was that all about?
No, exactly. Let alone just a terrifying thought of here you are riding the horse while being observed by something.
Yeah.
And not knowing that you're being observed. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and the minute you leave the horse, voila, this takes place. And when her boyfriend timed it from where the horse stood, and another thing, there was no blood. The horse was not bleeding.
Of course. No, of course not.
From where the horse was standing, he paced off to her little, my wife had it, a tack room, got the curry brush, came back with the curry brush, and saw the horse. He said he walked up, dug around the box a little bit, grabbed something, walked back. He said it wasn't even a minute.
Right.
So your nanosecond theory is not that far off.
No, it's ultra terrifying.
Well, we really run the gambit tonight. I'll tell you that. We've talked about some pretty horrifying things. Butch, thanks for coming on with us. Where can folks find you?
Facebook, UFORCOP.com, J.A.A.R magazine, Phantoms and Monsters. We're everywhere.
And on the trail of UFOs.
And I gotta try to find that.
I'll make sure you get it.
Okay, I appreciate that. But I want to say one more thing, and this is I'm going to try to corral Sean on this one. I'll get Vance if I can.
Sure.
We've been tracking these bipedals now for almost 5 years. Yeah, almost 5 years, and we got 65 reports. And one of the things that keeps coming up is wherever we have a really good sighting report, usually multi-witness, stuff like that, there's a cave close by or two, there's water, there's maybe an old abandoned town like we have all over Pennsylvania. You're familiar with that, Sean.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think what I'm going to try to do is get together a expedition when the weather breaks and hit a couple of these caves, a couple of these towns.
Sign me up.
Okay.
I'm game.
I will.
You got a whole bunch
of
if
they're an abandoned town, then that's If it's an abandoned town, then it's good for social distancing. So it'd be really appropriate.
Yeah. Let's get this COVID-19 thing out of the way. How Butch has it been bugging you out your way?
Oh my God! Yeah, we're shut down now till April 30th.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at my dog like he's a filet mignon. You know, I'm trying to figure out what part of the yard I want to bury the wife's body in. You know.
Hey, Butch, where's your wife? Out in the garden?
Yeah.
Well, I don't see her. Well, that's because she's underneath it.
Yeah, right.
Butch, it's always good to talk to you, buddy. I'm glad you came on with us for our first part of E.T. Horror Stories. We'll have you on again because I know this is going to be a popular topic. Vance, where can folks find you?
Well, after tonight's discussion, they're going to find me in about a 25-foot bunker underneath my house here that I'm currently digging out. It's terrifying. No, folks can find me on Facebook, Vance A. Nesbitt, and on Instagram, Vance _ Nesbitt _ NRML. Boy, I almost forgot. And of course, you know, you'll always see me over at the SuperNRML and Sasquatch Experience, and I'm not hard to find. But like I said, just knock about 5 times and scream really loud because I'll be in the bunker from here on out.
I'll be in the bunker, folks. I'm Sean Forker. You can find me everywhere at my name at Sean Forker. That's SeanForker. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and our website, SuperNRML.com. Our next episode, The Smurl Haunting. We're titling it The Haunted Revisited. It's one. Thank you for coming along to this week's event. Remember, if by chance you get an odd feeling and something doesn't seem right, don't be alarmed by it. It's just the supernormal.